Melissa Carter flinched visibly as the M4 carbine discharged on Fort Benning's qualification range, her auburn hair falling forward to cover her face as she instinctively ducked behind the safety officer's podium. Around her, soldiers from the 75th Ranger Regiment exchanged amused glances at the range safety officer's reaction to what was, for them, the routine sound of small arms fire. "Carter, how the hell are you the range safety officer if you can't even handle the sound of gunfire?" called Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, his voice carrying across the Georgia training grounds. "From which city in the world are you watching this video today? Let us know in the comments, and if you believe that heroes come in the most unexpected forms, don't forget to subscribe." The other Rangers laughed, their amusement barely disguised as they continued their qualification course. What none of them knew was that beneath Melissa's civilian contractor uniform lay scars and a combat medic badge that would make every ranger on that range snap to attention and render a salute. At 32, Melissa was younger than most civilian range safety officers at Fort Benning, having been hired just 4 months earlier with what appeared to be minimal qualifications. Her personnel file listed only prior military experience and a 2-year stint at a local shooting range in Columbus, Georgia. The base commander had questioned her hiring, but the civilian contractor company had insisted she met all the basic requirements. Now, as she visibly trembled at each rifle report, many wondered if strings had been pulled to get her the position. Melissa's morning had started at 4:30 a.m. with a nightmare, the same one that had plagued her for the past 18 months. The sound of incoming mortar rounds, the frantic calls for a medic, the weight of a wounded ranger in her arms as she dragged him to cover, and the searing pain as shrapnel tore through her own body. She had woken drenched in sweat, her hand automatically reaching for the faded scar that ran from her right shoulder down to her elbow, a permanent reminder of the day that had earned her both a Silver Star and an honorable medical discharge. By 5:45 a.m., she was showered and dressed in her civilian contractor uniform, khaki cargo pants, and a blue polo shirt with the Range Safety Division logo. As she pinned on her identification badge, she reminded herself why she was here, why she endured the daily humiliation of appearing weak and frightened in front of the very soldiers she had once served alongside. Dr. Mitchell had called it immersion therapy, facing her triggers directly until they lost their power over her. The Army psychologist had been skeptical of her plan to return to a firing range, but Melissa had been adamant. "I need to do this," she had told him. "I need to find my way back." The qualification range was already bustling when she arrived at 6:30 a.m. The morning mist hung low over the Georgia pines as the Rangers from 3rd Battalion prepared for their monthly qualification. Melissa took her position at the safety officer's podium, reviewing the day's roster and safety protocols. She knew most of these men by reputation only. She had served with 2nd Battalion during her time as a combat medic. But the Ranger community was small, and word traveled fast. "Morning, Carter," said Master Sergeant Williams, the senior NCO overseeing the qualification. "Try not to pass out today, all right? I've got a full roster and no time for drama." Melissa nodded, keeping her eyes on her clipboard. "Yes, Sergeant, I'll do my best." "Your best hasn't been very impressive so far," Williams muttered, walking away to address his troops. The first shots of the day came at precisely 7 a.m., and despite her mental preparation, Melissa couldn't stop her body's reaction. Her heart rate spiked, her palms grew sweaty, and she instinctively ducked at the sound. The Rangers noticed, of course. They always noticed. The whispers and sidelong glances were familiar by now, the civilian who couldn't handle the job, the woman who had no business on a military range. By midday, the qualification was proceeding smoothly, despite the growing heat. Georgia summers were unforgiving, and the temperature had climbed past 95 degrees by noon. Melissa distributed water to the soldiers between relays, enduring their jokes and barely concealed contempt. As she handed a bottle to Sergeant Rodriguez, he shook his head. "Seriously, Carter, what's your story? Did you sleep with someone to get this job? Because there's no way you're qualified." Melissa kept her expression neutral, a skill she had perfected during multiple combat deployments. "Just doing my job, Sergeant. Your job is to ensure range safety, not jump at every bang," Rodriguez continued, enjoying the laughter of his squad. "Maybe you should try the library. I hear it's quieter." She turned away, focusing on her clipboard and the next relay of shooters. The comments stung, but not as much as they once had. 18 months of therapy had given her perspective, if not peace. The flashbacks and panic attacks had diminished in frequency, but loud noises, especially gunfire, still triggered her fight-or-flight response. Dr. Mitchell had warned her it might always be this way, that some wounds never fully healed. At 2:30 p.m., as the qualification was winding down, Master Sergeant Williams approached her podium. "Carter, I need to speak with you privately." Melissa followed him to the small administrative building at the edge of the range, her stomach knotting with familiar anxiety. Was this finally it? The termination she had been expecting since her first day? Williams closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I received a call from Colonel Bennett this morning. He wants to know why you're working as a civilian range safety officer." Melissa kept her face carefully blank. "I'm qualified for the position, Sergeant." "Are you?" Williams pulled a folder from his desk and opened it. "Because I've been doing some digging, and your personnel file doesn't add up. 2 years at a local range doesn't qualify you for this position, especially not with your reactions to gunfire." "I have prior military experience," Melissa said carefully. "So, your file says, but there are no details, no unit assignments, no service records, nothing." Williams leaned forward. "Who are you really, Carter?" Before Melissa could respond, the radio on Williams' desk crackled to life. "Range Control, this is Outpost 7. We have a situation developing at the eastern perimeter. 3 unauthorized vehicles have breached the fence line and are heading toward the range complex. Security forces are responding, but they're at least 10 minutes out." Williams grabbed the radio. "This is Master Sergeant Williams at Qualification Range Delta. What kind of situation? Over." "Armed individuals. At least 6, possibly more. They appear to be heading directly for your position. Recommend immediate evacuation. Over." Williams swore under his breath. "Acknowledged. Implementing security protocols now. Out." He turned to Melissa. "We need to evacuate the range, now." They rushed outside to find the Rangers already alert to the situation, their training kicking in as they secured their weapons and prepared defensive positions. Williams took command, directing soldiers to strategic points around the range complex, while organizing the evacuation of non-essential personnel. "Carter," he called, "get to the parking area and coordinate the evacuation. Make sure everyone gets out safely." Melissa nodded and headed toward the parking lot, but a movement in her peripheral vision made her pause. Through the tree line at the eastern edge of the range, she caught glimpses of camouflaged figures moving with tactical precision, not the disorganized approach of common intruders, but the coordinated movement of trained operators. She changed direction, moving quickly to Williams' position behind a concrete barricade. "Sergeant, those aren't random intruders. They're moving tactically, using proper spacing and cover." Williams gave her a surprised look. "And you know this how?" Before Melissa could answer, gunfire erupted from the tree line. The Rangers returned fire immediately, their training evident in their disciplined response. But they were at a disadvantage, caught in the open on a range designed for controlled shooting, not combat. "They're trying to pin us down," Williams shouted over the gunfire. "Rodriguez, get your team to the eastern flank. Johnson, maintain suppressive fire." Melissa assessed the situation with the calm clarity that had once been her hallmark in combat. The intruders were well armed and positioned to cut off their escape routes. This wasn't a random attack. It was a planned operation with a specific objective. A cry of pain cut through the chaos as Private Jenkins took a round to the leg, falling exposed in the open area between barricades. Without hesitation, Melissa sprinted from cover, reaching the wounded soldier as bullets kicked up dirt around them. With practiced efficiency, she dragged him behind a concrete barrier, immediately assessing his wound. "Femoral arteries intact," she muttered, pulling a tourniquet from a pouch that hadn't been on her belt moments before. Her movements were swift and sure as she applied the tourniquet above the wound, her hands no longer trembling despite the gunfire all around them. Jenkins stared at her in shock. "How did you—" "Stay down and keep pressure on this," she ordered, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in crisis. Williams had witnessed her actions and was now looking at her with new understanding. "Carter, what the hell?" "No time," Melissa cut him off. "Those aren't random attackers. They're after something specific." She pulled a concealed sidearm from an ankle holster no one had noticed before. "I count at least 8, possibly more in reserve. They're using standard military tactics, which means they're either current or former military." Williams's expression shifted from confusion to grudging respect. "Who are you really?" "Former 75th Regiment combat medic," Melissa replied, checking her weapon with practiced ease. "2nd Battalion, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, Silver Star recipient. Now we need to get these men out of here." Before Williams could respond, another ranger went down, this time with a more serious wound to the chest. Melissa was moving before anyone could react, sprinting across open ground as bullets tore up the earth around her. She reached the fallen soldier, immediately identifying a tension pneumothorax, a collapsed lung that would kill him within minutes without treatment. With calm efficiency that belied the chaos around her, Melissa pulled a medical kit from another hidden pouch and performed an emergency needle decompression, inserting the needle into the soldier's chest to release the trapped air. The ranger gasped as pressure was relieved, his color improving almost immediately. "I need cover fire to move him," she called out, and instantly the rangers responded, laying down suppressive fire as she dragged the wounded man to safety. By now, Williams had reorganized his men, using Melissa's assessment of the enemy positions to establish a more effective defense. "Carter, or whoever you are, I need you to keep these men alive while we hold the perimeter until reinforcements arrive." Melissa nodded, already moving to check on Jenkins again. As she knelt beside him, the sleeve of her polo shirt rode up, revealing the edge of a tattoo. Not just any tattoo, but the distinctive combat medic badge with a scroll beneath it that read 75th Ranger Regiment. Jenkins' eyes widened. "You're Doc Carter," he whispered in recognition. "The Angel of Kandahar." Melissa froze, then slowly nodded. That was a long time ago. The nickname had followed her since her second tour in Afghanistan, when she had run through heavy enemy fire to reach 3 wounded rangers pinned down in an exposed position. She had treated their wounds under continuous fire, then carried each one to safety when the medevac couldn't reach their position. The mission had earned her the Silver Star and a reputation throughout the regiment. Word spread quickly among the Rangers as they held their defensive positions. The civilian safety officer they had mocked for months was actually a legend within the regiment, a combat medic who had saved dozens of lives before a mortar attack in her final deployment had left her with severe injuries, and the PTSD that explained her reaction to gunfire. As the firefight intensified, Melissa moved from position to position, treating wounds and offering tactical advice based on her combat experience. When a grenade landed near a group of Rangers, she didn't hesitate, grabbing it and throwing it back toward the attackers before it could detonate. The explosion sent dirt and debris raining down, but the Rangers were unharmed. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" Rodriguez asked in amazement. "Same place you did," Melissa replied, already moving to the next wounded soldier. "Ranger School." The tide of the battle began to turn as the Rangers, inspired by Melissa's courage and guided by her tactical insights, coordinated their defense more effectively. When one of the attackers broke cover to advance, Melissa raised her sidearm and fired a single shot with perfect accuracy, dropping the man with a clean hit. "Thought you were afraid of gunfire," Williams remarked as he reloaded beside her. "I am," Melissa admitted, her hands steady despite the admission. "Every single day. But being afraid doesn't mean you can't do what needs to be done." The sound of approaching helicopters signaled the arrival of reinforcements, and the attackers began to retreat. As they fled, one of them dropped a tablet that Melissa quickly retrieved. The screen showed classified information about a weapons system being tested at Fort Benning, the likely target of their operation. By the time the security forces arrived, the situation was under control. 4 Rangers had been wounded, but thanks to Melissa's immediate medical intervention, all would survive. The attackers had left 3 of their own behind, 2 dead, 1 wounded and captured. As the wounded were evacuated and the scene secured, Colonel Bennett himself arrived by helicopter. He approached Melissa, who was helping load the last of the injured Rangers into a medevac. "Staff Sergeant Carter," he said formally. "It's been a while." Melissa straightened and saluted. "Sir." "At ease." Bennett looked around at the aftermath of the battle. "Seems like you've been hiding your light under a bushel, Sergeant." "Just trying to find my way back, sir," Melissa replied honestly. Bennett nodded in understanding. "PTSD?" "Yes, sir. The mortar attack in Kandahar. 18 months of therapy so far." "And you thought working at a firing range was good therapy?" There was no judgment in his tone, only curiosity. "Exposure therapy, sir. Dr. Mitchell at the VA suggested I needed to face my triggers directly. She managed a small smile, though he probably had something less dramatic in mind. Williams joined them, his expression a mixture of respect and confusion. Sir, with all due respect, why wasn't I informed that we had a decorated combat medic working as a safety officer on my range? Bennett sighed. Because officially, Staff Sergeant Carter has been on medical leave pending potential medical retirement. Her presence here as a civilian contractor was unofficial, part of her rehabilitation program. Which was working, Melissa added quietly. Slowly, but it was working. The flinching was getting less severe each week. Rodriguez approached, looking uncharacteristically humble. Ma'am, he said, addressing Melissa with newfound respect. The men wanted me to tell you thank you. Jenkins and Martinez would be dead if not for you. Melissa nodded acknowledgement, uncomfortable with the attention. For months she had been invisible on this range, the incompetent civilian everyone mocked or ignored. Now, suddenly, she was visible again, her true identity and capabilities exposed. Later that evening, as the base returned to normal operations and the investigation into the attack began, Melissa sat alone in the now empty medical building, her civilian contractor shirt exchanged for a clean Army t-shirt someone had found for her. The door opened and Master Sergeant Williams entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her one.
Thanks.
She accepted it gratefully, the adrenaline crash leaving her exhausted. Williams sat across from her. So the range safety officer who jumps at every gunshot is actually one of the most decorated combat medics in regiment history. Melissa shrugged. Ironic, isn't it? Why hide it? Why put yourself through months of ridicule when you could have just told us who you were? Because I needed to be nobody, Melissa explained. I needed to face my fears without the weight of that reputation, without everyone watching to see if the angel of Kandahar was going to break down or wash out. She took a sip of coffee, and because I needed to prove to myself that I could still function in this environment, even with the PTSD, Williams nodded slowly. And could you? Before today, I mean. Getting there, Melissa admitted. The first month, I could barely stay on the range for an hour without having a panic attack. By last week, I was making it through full days. She smiled faintly. Today was actually the first day I didn't take anti-anxiety medication before my shift. Hell of a day to skip it, Williams remarked with grudging admiration. Yeah, well, I've never had great timing. The door opened again, and Colonel Bennett entered with a man in a suit that screamed federal agent. Sergeant Carter, this is Special Agent Donovan with the FBI. He'd like to ask you some questions about today's incident. Donovan stepped forward. Sergeant, the men you encountered today were part of a mercenary group hired to steal information about a new weapon system being tested here. Your actions likely prevented a significant breach of national security. Melissa absorbed this information with the calm acceptance of someone who had seen too much to be easily surprised. Just doing my job, sir. That's just it, Bennett interjected. I think it's time you got back to your real job. He placed a folder on the table in front of her. If you want it. Melissa opened the folder to find reinstatement papers and a transfer to the Ranger Medical Training Battalion as an instructor. Sir, the Army needs experienced combat medics to train the next generation, Carter, especially ones who understand the real cost of combat. Bennett's expression softened slightly. And maybe teaching others would be better therapy than jumping at gunfire every day. What about the PTSD? Melissa asked honestly. We all carry scars, Sergeant, Bennett replied. Some are just more visible than others. The question is whether you can still do the job despite them. Melissa thought about the day's events. How, when it mattered, her training had overridden her fear. How her hands had remained steady when lives depended on it. How, for the first time in 18 months, she had felt like herself again. I can do the job, sir, she said with quiet confidence. As dawn broke over Fort Benning the next morning, Melissa Carter stood at the firing line of the qualification range, no longer flinching at each report. The Rangers of 3rd Battalion had requested she oversee their completion of the qualification course, and this time there were no jokes, no sidelong glances, only respect. Rodriguez approached as she checked her clipboard. Staff Sergeant, he said formally, the men were wondering if you might demonstrate proper shooting stance for training purposes. Melissa recognized the olive branch for what it was. With a small smile, she accepted the offered rifle, moving to the firing line with the fluid grace of someone returning to a familiar element. She took a breath, centered herself, and fired 5 rounds in rapid succession. When the target was retrieved, all 5 shots formed a tight group in the center. "Guess you're not afraid of gunfire after all," Rodriguez remarked. "Oh, I still am," Melissa corrected him, handing back the rifle. "But being a ranger isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done anyway." As the rangers nodded in understanding, Melissa felt something she hadn't experienced in 18 months, the sense of belonging, of being part of something greater than herself. The civilian contractor who feared gunfire was gone, and in her place stood Staff Sergeant Melissa Carter, combat medic, Silver Star recipient, the Angel of Kandahar, scars, PTSD, and all. The combat medic badge tattooed on her arm, hidden for so long beneath long sleeves and shame, was now visible for all to see, a symbol not just of what she had been, but of who she still was, despite everything she had endured. The range safety officer who feared gunfire had found her way back, not by overcoming her fear, but by embracing it as part of who she had become.